As you know, I like to tell the story of the Roger Locker rescue mission. I think one of the greatest rescue stories of all time. And some of you have heard me tell that story. I wrote about it briefly in a short paper that I did when I was in the War College, and I have about a dozen copies here for anybody that would like to read it. It's called Leadership That Inspires Excellence. Very briefly, Roger Locker, a fellow member of it's on one of my patches somewhere, the 555th Fighter Squadron, was shot down over North Vietnam, and for 22 days we had no word. We figured he was killed or captured, and on the 22nd day he came up on the radio, and we went in for a rescue effort that afternoon. The ground fire was so heavy around the airfield that was nearby that we couldn't do it. The next day, General John Vogt, VOGT, the four-star commander of 7th Air Force in Saigon, in consultation with General Fred Wyan, the Army commander, canceled the entire strike mission to Hanoi and dedicated every resource, over 150 airplanes, to go rescue Roger Locker. And we went in and we got him out in one of the, as I mentioned earlier, one of the great rescues of all time. Brought him all the way back to Udon, Thailand. General Vogt flew up from Saigon and was the first of hundreds of us to meet him as he stepped off that chopper after 23 days. Magnificent story, but I don't believe there's another country on our planet, even the British, who would spend so much money, commit so many resources, take such great risk under such great odds to rescue one person. To rescue one person. It says so much about who we are as a military and as a nation. The importance that we put on life and freedom in the individual. John Stuart Mill wrote, "War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling which believes that nothing is worth war is much worse. A person who has nothing for which he is willing to fight, nothing which is more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature and has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by better people than himself." No one despises war more than those of us who have been close to it. No one appreciates life and freedom more than those who have faced the loss of it each day in the combat arena. But ladies and gentlemen, it's not what ought to be, it's what is. Many people, particularly running for office, talk in terms of what ought to be rather than what is. And what is reality, in my opinion, we face the most critical time in all of human history because of this threat that's never been as real as it is today. An enemy that doesn't wear a uniform. An enemy that looks just like we do. And as I said earlier, in my opinion, we must not fail. I used to be irritated by people who are always talking about their kids and bringing the pictures of their kids around, making you look at them and things like that. And for the last few years, I've been bragging about my kid everywhere I go. And I'm going to do a little of it right now. Son Matt graduated from basic military training 11th of February 2005. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of those ceremonies, but if you haven't, it's worth the trip. When, 500 or 1,000 of our young Americans march by and and take the oath of office and sign up to be members of our military. So they asked if I would like to be the reviewing official and administer the oath for my son's graduation from basic military training. And they allowed me to speak for 1 minute. And Chief Daly, who ran that program a few years ago down at Lackland Air Force Base for the Air Force part of it, gave me the words that I was allowed to use for my minute speech before I administered the oath. And you know, they were okay. They were very politically correct and pretty bureaucratic. And you can imagine how I feel about most bureaucrats. So I asked General Mary K. Hertog, the wing commander, if I could use my own words. She said, well, do you mind if I review them? I don't know why she didn't trust this beat-up old fighter pilot, Jim. But she did review them. She said they were okay. And it's only a minute, and I thought you might like to hear what I had to say that day. 11 February 2005, 44 years ago, last month, as an 18-year-old Air Force cadet, I was honored to march in President John Kennedy's inaugural parade. Most of us will never forget what President Kennedy said that very cold January day, 1961. Ask not what our country can do for you, but what you can do for our country. Almost a half century later, 20th of January 2005, President Bush challenged us to make the choice to serve in a cause that is larger than ourselves. He said, thus we will add not just to the wealth of our nation, but to its character. And we will go forward with complete confidence in the eventual triumph of freedom. You, speaking to the graduates that day, you've chosen the most honorable profession on earth because nothing is more important than protecting and preserving liberty. And when you wear the uniform of the armed services of the United States of America, the public gives you its trust and its heart. Not only will you not let us down, you will make us very, very proud. And then, the proudest moment of my career, the opportunity to administer their oath. And it reminded me of one of George Washington, General Washington's famous, not his quote, but one of the quotes that he liked the best. We cannot guarantee success, but we can guarantee that we deserve it. We cannot guarantee success, but what we can guarantee is that we deserve it. You know, it's hard to tell a fighter pilot that he can only speak for a few minutes because we're so like Italians. As long as we can use our hands, we can just keep on going. I don't know why, but we like to tell these stories. Actually, I do know why. Alan McCarter, a classmate of mine, who was a combat pilot, flew with the Air Force Thunderbirds, was a senior vice president at Federal Express, was administrator of the FAA, is now the chairman of Airbus North America. We were out to Alan's house last night, and he talked about the very same thing I mentioned earlier, about how we hate war, but we love combat. We hate war, but there's something about combat. Imagine being in an arena where living or dying depends on winning or losing, and we win and we live.